our next conversation podcast with us and Hans Wolf. You can best describe Hans as someone who is curious and not afraid to challenge the status quo. For those of us who constantly wonder whether or not we're on the right career trajectory and the right career path, Hans is a great example of how one can be successful when adopting an unconventional career path and get to where you want to be purely on the foundations of learning, curiosity, and just knowing what your values are, knowing what your true values are. Hans is currently the Chief Information and Transformation Officer at Mooney Valley City Council, a position that would have seemed a long way off when he was starting out in various financial services role at ANSAT. He sees it as his role not just to implement new technologies for a very large team, but also to consider the human psychology and the response to those technologies in an ever-changing world. For those of us who tend to complain about not having enough time in the day, Hans talks about leveraging micro moments during the day to learn new things, something that we can all sort of take something from. The conversation is full of insights, and if you're someone who works in large, complex teams, this is a great opportunity to learn from a senior leader to see how their mind operates and how they navigate challenges on a day-to-day basis. Our favourite during the conversation was when he talks about the bike rack psychology. So be sure to tune in and listen to that one. Look, I'll stop talking right there, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Hans as much as we did. Would love to have him back again soon. Thank you. Bye.
And the first thing that struck me was, in terms of challenging the things we learn, Hans is super at it. Most people would just accept what the professors and the lecturers would say, but I constantly noticed Hans would sort of like fact check, sense check, and then if it doesn't make sense, he would sort of like put his hand up and then have a good dialogue and a conversation, and not afraid to have a debate. So always challenging the status quo. How is that a natural thing, or is that sort of like a worked skill?
Yeah, I would say there's two parts to it. I think there's a natural curiosity that's probably been there all along, and certainly when I was growing up, I was always curious. I always wanted to know how something worked, and then I think as I got older, I got more confident in perhaps my own abilities, so I was able to voice my curiosity and challenge things a bit more. So I think I needed that. I think I needed a bit of age or a bit of experience behind me to feel confident enough to actually express it openly or overtly. So whereas perhaps I was always there when I was young, but I didn't say anything. So I certainly know school reports would always say that I was the quiet one in the class, but I never actually. I don't think I asked enough questions when I was younger, but anyway, making up for it now.
And when did you sort of like start actively thinking about it? Was it after your first professional career, or do you distinctly remember sort of like a tipping point or a transition point? And if so, how did you build up that confidence?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not really sure the tipping point. It's interesting you mentioned uni before, because I think when I went to do postgraduate with yourself, Kishan, where I met you, I think that cemented for me that perhaps I do know things, and I'm hearing from these experts, and I wasn't sure that I was learning that much from them. So that was interesting for me. I don't know that I knew that ahead of time. I don't know that I don't know that I had that confidence again to really know that. And it was really only when I got put in that formal sort of learning setting that it really hit home for me that actually maybe my experiences are the equivalent of what these professors are telling me. And maybe I can bring to them some real world scenarios of what they're trying to theoretically tell me. I didn't really feel like I was talking to someone in a hierarchical sense.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like I was talking to a colleague or a peer.
Yeah.
And that's when it sort of hit me that if I'm feeling that way, then maybe I am at that level. Maybe I felt that bit of imposter syndrome up until that formal learning moment.
It's funny how we don't rate ourselves or our own experience or knowledge that we've gained over the years just because it happened so gradually, like it's so incremental, built up over years and years until you are in a situation like you just mentioned in a classroom setting where someone supposedly, knows more than you, and you come to the realization, I actually have come a long way in my career. And so that's fascinating. It's on that point. In fact, Hans, you decided to go to university to progress. Actually, whatever we can talk about your decision to go to university. Was it to after you worked for a few years, and I assume at the time you had a young family, and you're taking on a lot, but you've also sort of come to a realization that there is a gap in your armory that you need to fill. You need a particular skill set. So the realization, I guess, to fill that gap and going to university at when you have a young family, when you have a career, how did that play out? And I'm sure you did planning before it, but the experience itself when you go through it, for a couple of years, I'm sure that's very challenging.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great noble reason for doing postgraduate. I think it was more of a risk mitigation for myself. So I started out in my career without finishing my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd sort of worked through and was fortunate enough to sort of have lots of different experiences, lots of jobs, without having a formal qualification of any sort. So lots of little short courses and bits and pieces, but left uni after my first year. And it was back at a time when you can kind of get a job in your chosen field without finishing your degree. And I thought I'd go back and finish it, but never did. So times have changed, obviously, but that's what it was kind of like back in the 90s. So so basically it was a risk mitigation because the company I worked for went broke, and I thought, here I am. I've got a young family. I've got no formal qualification. I've got to apply for jobs, and it went broke just after September 11. So if you remember, the world was, everything stalled. Everyone was nervous about what was going to happen. Was there going to be wars? Well, who knew what was going to happen?
Yeah.
So everything stalled, and I was sitting there going, damn, I've got no formal qualification. I've got a young family. I've got a big mortgage. How did I get myself in this situation? I better just make sure that I get myself established again, and when I get a chance, go back to uni and finish this thing and make sure I at least have options going forward. So it was more about mitigating risk of not just being able to get by on experience, but having that formal qualification as well.
Well, whatever the reason is, I think it's a funny one, because I remember, I think when we did studies around project management and things like that, and Hans was kind of doing the same thing at MIT with me. Hans has been running multi-million-dollar projects before that, and I'm thinking, well, perhaps Hans can actually teach some of these guys as to how it's done in real life.
There you go. I had no idea you sort of thought that, actually. Yes, I was so unaware of my own impact I was having in those classrooms, or what I was doing.
No, fun days for sure. And maybe just on the career trajectory, Hans, if I can ask, I think you started your career in non-technology kind of sector, right? Mm-hmm. Accounting. Mm-hmm. And then kind of transitioned into technology, and then management, and then you're now in executive leadership, responsible for a lot of people, and then transitioning infrastructure, technology, everything in a very large city council. How did that come about? As in, how were you able to move and manipulate your career like that? So firstly, was it an active decision, or things sort of tend to fall into place if you start pursuing things and then just explore your curiosity?
Yeah, I think the first half was definitely not planned at all. I just tried to take opportunities, I think, and I was fortunate. I worked for a for a company called Ansett, which was sort of people wouldn't know it today. It was a failed airline.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah, know that one.
so, but it was really, really big. So big organization. I think it had around 16,000 employees. So, and I started in finance, in the finance department. And the finance department at a place like that had 500 employees, just in the finance department alone. So it's big sort of scale, lots of opportunity to move around. And I remember when Ansett collapsed, I was looking back at my jobs I had there, and I realized I stayed in a job on average around 10 months. So I was trying different things all the time, which was really, I think in hindsight, fantastic for me. So and one of those things, when you're in finance, you have to run a general ledger. And so I said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll give it a try. And that sort of got me moving, edged me in towards the technology space. Then they were saying, well, if you're running the general ledger and everything, you probably know how to fix my computer. And I went, I don't know, I'll give it a try. And then it's sort of one thing led to another. And before you knew it, I was in IT rather than finance. I'd sort of transitioned completely out. And and it was great, because that was kind of Y2K thing. So everything was kind of, IT was the big flavor of the month, and everyone was special that worked in IT. So I got swept up in a bit of that as well. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the transformation element. I really enjoyed the psychology of it, of technology, and how when you are changing things and how people respond to that change and how you help them get through those changes. So that sort of stuff resonated with me. And and then I started to make sort of very deliberate decisions after that. Well, after Ansett collapsed and I decided I had to do something, I was fortunate enough to work for the County Court of Victoria. So it's a sort of middle tier court where they do not murders and things, and not sort of minor crime, but everything in between. So, but I was lucky to get there, and I was lucky to work with all the judiciary, like really, really people at the top of their craft. So it was a little bit inspiring even to be working with them. So that kind of helped me, and it got me on a path towards the public sector. And that's when I started to realize that actually, I think the public sector values kind of resonated more with me, and I enjoyed the complexity of projects in the public sector. So when I worked in the private sector, you're either doing something to make money or save money. It's pretty much those two things at the time. That's all you're kind of focused on. Whereas in the public sector, it was, you name it, we were focusing on all sorts of community outcomes and fairness, and like when you're in the justice sector, you're focusing on all sorts of different outcomes with your project management. So the complexities were much higher. And but the values were really resonated. So if I can tell you a story about when there was a light bulb moment for me when I was at the county court, when we did an e-filing project. So you could lodge documents with the court electronically. That hadn't been done before, so that was pretty cool. And we won an award, and it's the public sector, right? So the awards are not a bit that, like, you get a certificate and you get like a $50 voucher. That's your award. But anyway, they said, "Oh, what do you want your voucher to?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll have my voucher to JB Hi-Fi, right? So I'll buy some. I don't know what I was going to buy. I'll just get it from there." And there was sort of a project team, and we all got a voucher. And anyway, there was a bit of a ceremony. And so afterwards, I'm talking to the team, going, "Well, what did you get your voucher for?" And the first guy said, "Oh, I got mine. I put mine to the Salvation Army." I went, "Oh, okay, cool." Next one, where did you? And she said, "Oh, my voucher is for the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence." And I've gone, "Oh," and I start asking the next person, and it's also a charity. And then it dawned on me, holy shit! Every all these people that I'm working with, they're all doing this. They're not doing it for any reward. They're doing it to give their little reward, their little token they got. They even gave that away. They took nothing for themselves. And here I was with the JB Hi-Fi voucher, going, well, what am I doing here? Maybe I'm in the. But that really hit me, and I really, really liked the fact that they were so unselfish or whatever. They weren't worried about themselves. They were worried about everyone else. They were there for all the right reasons. And we put in for that project. We put in lots of hours. It was a really, really good project. And even when they could take a bit of time to acknowledge themselves, they still didn't. They still gave this $50 away.
Yeah.
Except for me. But I can tell you that was the last time I did anything like that.
I'm sure you switched to the other side now, where you.
I've switched to the other side. That's right. So, and then I get angry when I find public servants that aren't thinking like that. So I try to weed them out. Because there's plenty there because perhaps they can't make it anywhere. So there's it takes all sorts. There's square pegs and round holes everywhere.
Yeah, it gives me comfort that there are people in the public space who could be out there, just sort of deploying their skills, working for large corporations, but they've chosen, and it says a lot about people in this world, in this where it can be tough sometimes to make a living, but people choose to stay in the public sector because their belief towards it, the impact they're having on the community is so strong. And
it is. And I try to talk about that with my teams about when we walk along the street, you engage with the community, and you've got to be able to look at them in the eye and know that you're doing the right thing by them. You genuinely every day are trying to make life better for everyone. Then that's a good feeling, right? When you go home, you feel good. Well, I guess that's a little bit selfish in itself, but you get a bit of joy out of helping others as well. And don't get me wrong, they still get paid. So, but it's a little something extra, I think.
It's a little extra bonus, right? Yeah.
Just
to make you go, just an extra mile, I guess, or.
Yeah, I think so.
Can I ask you, so you've kind of progressed a lot in your career, right? Into executive leadership. What's the hardest decision or challenge you had to overcome in your entire career so far?
Yeah, hardest decision. Probably politics, I guess. The workplace politics type of stuff. I've tried not to engage with it, but you come across it. Well, I come across it a bit. Usually people out of risk aversion and fear and things like that they sort of play politics. So that's been probably the hardest thing for me. I've tended to just try to focus on not really who I report to or anything like that. I've tried to focus on the community. If I'm doing what I think they will, if I walk down the street and 100 people say, yep, keep going with that, that's I kind of apply that sort of rule to my work rather than who I work for or who I work with. So that's got me into trouble for periods every now and then. So I've certainly had some interesting scenarios that I've had to actually leave jobs over as well, where I've been that wedged in a political move that I just didn't even notice that I've had to resign. I think before people are going to try to leave me holding a failed implementation of something.
Yeah.
And so I better, and I'm not responsible. If I was, I'd stay and try to fix it. But I was just, things like that happen. So I thought, oh shit, there's no way out here. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave now. So I have, and I think that has. So I've tried to be better at trying to see that coming.
Yeah.
But it's still a work in progress.
That was going to be my follow-up question then. If it is politics, and it sounds like one of those unavoidable things, that will always be there, particularly given at, the level of role you're in, you can't escape it, right? So
no, you can't. I think the beauty of being in technology land is people don't expect you to really engage with it. They think you're going to be some sort of geek and not worry about and sort of not engage with it. So I play that up, right? I'll try to look different to everyone else, or wear a t-shirt to work, or I'll try to just do things that don't look like I'm conforming to the norm, so that I get away with a little bit more. It sounds odd, right? But these are silly things you end up doing to just stay out of it.
No, it sounds like exactly you're figuring out how to deal with it, and it's working for you.
Well, yeah, I'm getting away with it so far, and I think I've also sort of tried to stay for one strategic cycle. So I tend to, when I come to a place, I tend to write the strategy for the next 3 or 4 years, deliver on that strategy, and then I think, oh well, it's time for someone else to maintain it, and I'll just move on. So that by staying 3 or 4 years, and focus, and it's 3 or 4 very focused years.
Yeah,
You just don't form all those alliances and things that that others tend to, and then get caught in things.
yeah.
So that's been another sort of mechanism as well, another coping mechanism.
And maybe if I can ask you, Hans, reflecting back on the journey you've been on so far,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to give, I don't know, some advice to your younger self, 25-year-old self, what would you say?
I'd probably say have a look at the public sector earlier. So I don't think I knew what I was missing at the time. So I'd probably suggest to people try a bit of public and try a bit of private, and see where or I'd say to myself, you understand your own values and what motivates you. And I don't think I knew that at the time, to be honest. I think even if I went back to my 25-year-old self, I'd probably dismiss myself and say, yeah, whatever, and keep chugging along. Where really, with a bit of experience behind me, I think my values have more and more influenced me as I've gone on. Or the things I hold dear. So that's probably what and I'd probably also talk about the complexities of, like, if you want to be like, I feel like right now I'm in the most complex environment I can be. As a technology type professional. I've had options to leave technology and go more mainstream management, and I've chosen not to because I've enjoyed the complexities. And in local government, the complexities are huge. There's so many different services. There's so many different applications. There's so many different employment types that exist there. So I would sort of tell myself that if you want to be challenged, you're gonna have to go to places like where I am now.
Couple of things too, and I was just writing these down so I don't forget. You mentioned values. That's come up in a recent conversation we had for this podcast with someone else, and it seems to be pivotal in terms of guiding successful leaders where they're going to go. What identifying values seems to play a key part, and that once you know what your values are, the decision making becomes a little bit easier. It helps with the guidance. So not a question, I'm just making an observation. So I think you mentioned that, so I think that seems to be kind of an emerging theme that we're seeing.
That's great. I'm actually, can I just say that's really pleasing to hear, actually. I think that's fantastic that people are acknowledging that and are letting that be their sort of North Star.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's tremendous. I think I don't know how to. I just wish people could know it earlier, what their values are. I don't know how I don't know if you need some experience behind you to get it, or.
Well, yeah, exactly. You wish these are the kind of things. Well, I certainly wish, that when I was even at school, we don't know ourselves enough to know what our true values are by then, but even exposing us to the idea when we were younger, spend time thinking about what your values are. You may be super ambitious, you may want to travel, you maybe want to be close to your family, you may value trust and loyalty. Could be anything, but the idea and exposure to these things would definitely go a long way, in helping people become more focused in life, I guess, in general. And like you said, I think you're being harsh on yourself when you say you came to that realization later about working in public sector, but you've had the opportunity to do that for many, many years. So, which is fantastic. The other things that I'd written down was, and I can break it up into, and you can answer it as you see fit. One was around, you mentioned complexity. So, and you seek out complexity, and that's, and you like complex problems. One is, what's your approach to sort of, what is your approach to complex problems that, and we're talking, I mean, setting a strategy in itself is a very complex problem, right? So for an organization, what's your approach to that? And the other one is, what do you sort of look back as your, biggest achievement or accomplishment in the public sector? I mean, it doesn't have to be a project, or could be anything. So those couple of things.
Yeah. Okay. So the complexity question, yes, it's the challenge, I guess. It's the more complex, the bigger the challenge. So the more wicked the problem, the bigger the challenge. So I think, I think I like the challenge. So in fact, I've had roles where so organisations are at maturity levels, right? And I've been to some that are not as mature as others, and so I'm just doing the same thing again. Just getting up to that maturity level. I think, oh well, what a shame. What a shame. I'm not actually extending myself at this point. But I still find the challenge in bringing them up to speed, and everyone being quite comfortable in where they were when I'm saying to them, no, you can be much, much better. We can do much more than this. So that influencing, and so you end up spending more time on getting to the heart of why they weren't progressing as an organisation adequately, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So what was holding them back? What's the culture that's been holding us back, and how can I influence that to just take some risks and keep moving? And it's not even that risky because I've already done this stuff before. Mm-hmm. So let's just get on our bikes and go. So so I think that challenging part is more resonates. And I think the technique or the tactic I've kind of come to, it's pretty basic. It's just chunking up issues, chunking up things into smaller bite-sized pieces, and pitching at progress. So just asking people to be better today than we were yesterday. Tomorrow, let's be better again. Let's just keep moving forward. And you see it in the public sector as well. Because there's that risk aversion.
Yes.
Because they pitch for perfection. They really try to make everything perfect before they will go forward with anything. And of course, it's never true, right? There is no such thing as perfection. And if you think you've got it, it changes by the time you get there. So you've got to just keep focusing on progress. And I think, if anything, that's probably one of the things that I've given to a few organizations is to not strive for perfection.
Yeah.
And just be okay with being better tomorrow than we were yesterday. And it's amazing how far you get in a year when everything's just better than it was the day before. If we're making progress and just letting go of trying to cover every scenario and everything in great detail before you even begin.
Yeah.
That's flawed. And I think it's very IT sort of trait. We try to, because everyone's very comfortable with going live with something that they've got bugs all over. They know it's not right, but you go live anyway, and you get people to experience it, and then you come up with version 2 and then version 3. So it's just well understood that there is no such thing as a perfect anything. But I don't know that prevails in other areas. I don't think it does.
No, that's such a powerful thing to just observation. If we just pause on that for a second, because we constantly get sort of this ingrained in us, to pursue perfection, to be the best at what you can, which is fine. I think it has its place. But what we don't focus on and should be focusing on when it comes to teaching or, leading our teams is progress. It is simple as that. It is progress. What you just said. It is progress over what you did yesterday, better than you were yesterday. And that is all that you need. And the pursuit of perfection can just hold people back. It's too daunting. It can be daunting. And one mistake and you feel like you got to start at zero again. It's just, and the idea, I think, and it may work for some people, but for a lot, it's flawed. And I think I just wanted to,
I imagine if you're if you're an engineer and you've got people's lives, that you're building a bridge or something, you probably want a bit of perfection in those type of roles. But
I get that, and
we're not in that. I'm not in those.
Yeah.
We're providing just core services, very basic services to people every day. And yeah, I think, but it's I don't know what it is, and I think the public sector has more of it, or it feels like it has more of it. I guess because everyone gets criticised so openly, and everyone's open with everything. So, which they should. Like, it's a public sector. You're spending other people's money, so you've got to be transparent about things. So you've got to cop the criticisms, but it does get people to just shrink into their shell a little bit too much. Or it becomes a learnt behaviour to just only poke your head up when you've got something perfect, which invariably even when it does happen, when people do take ages to do something and they do think it's perfect, someone will shoot it down immediately anyway. I think, you spent all that time, and energy, and it's still, anyway.
I'm quite curious about something, Hans. I want to pick your thought pattern or philosophy on this. So just imagine you're given an opportunity to do something, lead a team or set up an operation or whatever it is, but you don't actually have much experience or knowledge in that particular domain. How do you go about, would you kind of accept it, even though you don't have the opportunity or you don't have the right skill set and the experience right at that moment? If you do, what mental models and philosophies do you apply?
Yeah, and it happens all the time, right? Because there's always something new, that there's always a service in my organization, there's always a service you've never heard of that someone's doing. You think, oh, okay. And so you try to spot up on that. So I think that's where that natural curiosity has really helped me. I'm a bit of a researcher now. I like trying to learn as much as I possibly can about a topic. So I'll try to immerse myself for a bit until I feel I know enough. And I guess I'm not talking about sort of formal anything. I'm talking about instead of sitting in front of the TV at night watching whatever the hell's on, whatever reality TV shows on TV, I'll have my phone in front of me and I'll be just Googling things about whatever the topic is and just taking in snippets and bits and pieces, just regularly, just taking things in. If I'm on the tram to work, I'll be taking things in. I will use all those little sort of micro moments where I've got a little bit of downtime to just learn something, that I learn a bit more about it. So I will do that. I'm a big advocate for networking. So I will try to talk to others that might have already approached this issue or tackled it or learnt about it or what they've done or learned from them. And I'll share everything I can with my colleagues as well. So try to do that all the time. I'm forever ringing around asking people what they've done, or at least if I hear that someone else is about to do something that I've done, I'll reach out to them and say, look, I'm just letting you know we've been down that path. If you want to know, if you want to know where the pitfalls are, give me a ring. I'm happy to share. So, and because that's the beauty of government again, actually, we're not competing with each other. So no drama. In fact, it's in everyone's interest to get something done quicker than we could have otherwise. So definitely networking and benchmarking and trying to swat up as much as you possibly can. And then you still don't know everything, so you make your decision based on what you know, and you own it, I think. And just be prepared to say to everyone, this is based on what we know at the moment. This feels like the right course of action. You've drawn in as much diverse opinions as you possibly can to contribute to your decision. And if it goes pear-shaped, 6 months, 12 months down the track or whatever it is, just own it. Just say, well, that's what we knew at the time. Yep. And it's amazing when people try to blame you for something. You go, yep, I was wrong. You can just say, yeah, I was wrong. That's what I thought at the time, and I was wrong. And everyone, it just completely diffuses everyone wanting to shoot you.
I think more people need to learn how to say that. Yeah.
And I think that's such a powerful thing, isn't it? To say, yes, I made the decision with all the information I have at that particular moment, but I'm wrong.
It turned out to be wrong. I think that's okay. I think it's better than not making a decision, or it's better than not picking a path. At least you've got a choice. You've got a chance of getting the right path. So, and to be honest, it happens that infrequently. You don't really make truly wrong decisions. They're sort of versions of right, if you like, along a continuum.
Correct.
So you still learn something, it still shapes something, it still gets you closer to where you need to be, even if it does appear to be wrong. So quite okay with that. I think that's part of that progress, not perfection sort of model.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Hans, kind of switching gears a bit, what books, lessons, people, or situations have actually shaped you to be the person you are, the leader you are at the moment?
Yeah.
Anything that stand
tricky.
out?
Yeah, that's tricky because I'm I'd say I'm a big reader, but not a book reader. I'm a small article reader, but there was one very early on that I remember, and I often quote. It was a book called IT Doesn't Matter. It was kind of, and it was not really, it was more about when everyone's got a commodity service, don't value the commodity service. So for example, if everyone's using SAP if you're in a competitive situation and all your competitors are all using the same product as you, well, clearly the IT doesn't matter. It's the processes and the cultures and everything else that matter. So yeah, so I took away from that there are commodity things that you just buy on price, and then there's things that actually matter that you might buy on value or on a more intrinsic level. So I will apply that. I apply that probably every day, actually, and I'll very much say to vendors, actually, you're in the supplier camp for me. You're a commodity service. You're a telco or whatever. You want to be you aspire to be higher than that, but for me, you're not going to be. So I'm going to be buying on price. Know that up front. And others will be partners. Others I will want to partner with, and because I will see I need some more intrinsic value provided for them. So we will take a different approach to how we organise that type of stuff. So yeah, that sort of book shaped that. There's another one called The Brain That Changes Itself that I really liked, and it was I think it was Norman Douge, his name was, the doctor that wrote it. It was a series of case studies, but really the big takeaway for me was really, if you don't use it, you lose it type of thing. So if you're creating neural pathways and that helps you think, then if you're not practicing something, those neural pathways wither, but they get smaller, and therefore you're not as good at something. So it's just like any skill, right? You've got to practice the skill to get good at it. And yeah, and if you don't practice it, you're not good at it. And your brain is what determines all this stuff. These neural pathways, and that helps me. That has helped me with talking to people about, for example, I was talking about to a HR person yesterday about recruitment, and they were saying how the line managers are terrible at doing this, and this, and and HR, we're forever correcting them. And I was kind of questioning, saying, well, maybe they do recruitment once a year, and you're asking them to have all these skills and to know all these policies, and they're never going to retain it. So why are you even asking them to do that? Why don't you provide a better service to them for those that don't do recruitment often? Because they'll never have enough. They'll never be exposed to it enough to really gain a skill. They'll never practice it, and you'll always be lamenting the fact that they are not good at it. And I think, yeah, so that's just a human condition. We're gonna have to live with it. Like we can't. If I don't practice something, we don't get good at it. And so don't lament that the people aren't good at it. Let's figure out why they're not good at it. And it's probably because they're not practicing it. Then there are going to be other departments that have turnover and they're recruiting all the time. So no point giving them that extra service. They don't need it. They are practicing it. So that brain that changes itself really cemented that sort of model for me. And then I think, did you mention? And then there was, so it wasn't books, and I guess there was another one. It was not a book scenario now, but there was something I learned from, in fact, my in-laws, and they when they told me this, they were both sort of CEOs of organizations, and they had boards, and they said, and that they reported to, and they said, you've always got to leave. They called it the bike rack. You've got to leave the bike rack decision for the board. So you've got to make them feel like they have some sort of decision to make and some sort of role to play. Yeah. So ask them where you should position the bike rack outside the building that you're going to.
Oh,
that's classic.
that's cool.
Yeah, so give them something. So they'll leave the really juicy stuff that you spent ages working on. Just they'll gloss over that because you give them something that they can all relate to. And they've all got an opinion on, and they don't have to. I thought, and I've used that technique a lot. It's surprising how often I will just pose a question that I know everyone can just answer, so that they can feel involved and they can get included.
And they all have the same answer, so there's consensus, and that's great.
Yeah, and then let them debate where they bike rack should be, or whatever the scenario is. Let them. That's great. Go for it. Yeah, I'm not because the whole idea is you could care less where it actually goes, but you want them to feel that they've contributed and they own it. They own those. They own that whole strategy now, even though they're just sort of contributed to the bike rack component.
Let them pick the color, the location, whatever it is.
I'm going to actually use that. I'm going to use this bike rack decision.
I just, as you were saying it, I know we kind of focus the conversation on sort of workplace and career, but when you mentioned your in-laws, this actually, I wonder if this is a good decision to even apply in parenting. I've got 2 young kids, and this bike rack kind of philosophy. We as parents make the more critical decisions, but leave something up to them, within sort of, constraints. And they can, I asked my daughter this morning, do you want, I didn't ask her what she wants for breakfast. I asked her, do you want 2 or 3 eggs for breakfast? That's it. Her answer, she had to go with 2. So
there you go.
Because it wasn't, do you want cereal or pancakes or cereal or something unhealthy for your body versus eggs. It was just, do you want 2 or 3 eggs? So I guess we're yeah.
No, it's exactly you've got it. That's exactly the concept. Yeah, you're doing it. You're doing it already, and I love the fact you're applying it to your daughter. That's awesome.
I just got to take it to work now. Yeah.
I bet you find you're doing yourself. I bet you do it all. I bet you both. Everyone does it all the time, don't they? I think subconsciously or consciously, we kind of do those things.
Yeah, and I think you've got to do it in a way maybe you don't get called out. Just one thing before we go on. I know we're sort of approaching time. One thing before we go into the rapid fire sort of questions. You mentioned networking. Now, for early careers or people who are keen to learn this skill, which again is not something that's taught at schools, at university, or it's just something you have to learn on your own. Any starting, again, from my point of view on this is it's a two-way street. Networking is not about just asking and taking, and it is a two-way street. But what else would you like to sort of add to that in terms of how to network better or create a network, create a strong network?
Yeah. I don't know about creating. Oh, well, in fact, I guess I've created a couple, but I think people. I think if you ask a lot of questions, people actually want to talk about their experiences, and so if you've got nothing to contribute yourself, you're just trying to learn from everyone. People will give you. It's amazing. People are so generous with their time that, and I think that they get. Well, certainly when I've shared what I've been through with people, I get so much out of sharing it, and just it plays it back in my mind as to what we've even this conversation. Like you're playing things back. And it's nice to dwell on things, and then you start to reflect on things again, and you learn a bit more each time you reflect on even the same topics. You can reflect on multiple times, and you get a little bit out of it each time. That's just a little bit different. So I think I would encourage everyone to do it, even if you've got nothing to share. Just by being the person to ask the questions is helpful to both parties anyway. And then when you've actually got some experiences to share as well, you'll see the other side of the equation. You'll get tons out of it as well. So I would encourage everyone to do it to be honest, as often as they can. I think it's a great way to shortcut learning as well.
Yeah.
So I think it helps if I think I'm a bit of an auditable sort of learner. I like to learn from sort of listening to people and things like that. I'm better at that than reading. So it's sort of naturally plays into my learning style. So that's helpful as well, I think. And I think it helps you. If I was I was much more of an introvert, I think, as I was younger, and I think as I've got older, I've become a bit more balanced. But I think it helps you get out of that introversion, sort of, if you're that way inclined as well. Sort of forces you out of it.
Yeah. No, fantastic. We can sort of like keep talking about these different facets in a number of different ways. Perhaps again, as we go through different seasons of this podcast, we'll get hands back and then maybe pick a particular area, maybe a leadership area, executive leadership or technology leadership area, and then perhaps get a bit more in-depth discussion around it. The last segment of the podcast is what we call the fill in the blanks type questions or rapid fire type questions. So the first thing that comes to your mind, Hans, the gut feel kind of thing, just let us know what you think. So I'll kick off the first one. When things get really challenging, when things get really challenging, I chunk things up. I break it up into pieces. Deal with a piece at a time. Nice.
Fair answer. When I have to make a choice that will lead to short-term pain but long-term gain, I construct my thinking around. I construct my thinking by
probably never losing sight of the longer term.
Yeah.
So, and hoping that and ensuring that the short-term pain gets me to that long-term. Also, because you can do short-term things that can actually get you in different directions.
Yeah.
That seem expedient because of a personality type or whatever it might be, and I would always just try to push through that and just keep focusing on the long term. We need, as long as we're taking a step towards that long term.
Yeah,
I'm in. I'm all over it. I'm happy with that. So I would just accept the short term pain, suck it up, as long as it's part of the long term, and make sure it doesn't go on a tangent. Make sure I'm not going on some tangents.
Yeah. And so the last one is, when I know I don't or won't have all the facts to make an informed decision, what I do is
so if I'm not able to benchmark, and I'm putting caveats on these answers, I'm sorry. But if I can't research and can't benchmark and can't network, then I would wing it. I guess I'd trust my own head and heart and go for it, and then wear any consequences down the track, and make sure everyone was aware that I don't have all the ingredients I might otherwise like to bake the perfect cake, but I'll go with what I've got.
And
but I'd probably let people know.
Exactly. This ties in what you said earlier is, and if you make a mistake, you just say you made the decision with all the information you had at the time. So I
think that's it. And just own it. Just be okay with it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Hans. And you've been very, very generous with your time and sharing your wisdom as well. We really, really appreciate it. We'll definitely have to get you back for another session, just to focus in on a few more specific avenues. But nonetheless, thank you very much for taking the time.
Guys, it was fantastic. I loved every second of it. So thank you very much. Thanks for even doing this. It's great that you're even doing it. I love it. So very happy.
Thank you.
But thanks a lot.
Catch up soon.
I'll catch you later. All right. Bye, guys.